Last time on Tabletop Tango, Space Wizards, the Chronomancer, Gravity, Crazy. And now, the conclusion.
World, one of the best games of the day.
Welcome back, Savages. This is Tabletop Tango. I'm your host, Eric. Please like, subscribe, cast some phasers on those buttons. We really appreciate it. Hope people got my Star Trek reference there. Anyways, yeah, this is the continuation of the sci-fi arcane backgrounds, the sci-fi companion arcane backgrounds, part 2. So yeah, I mean, I did the first part, and here we go with the second part. So getting right into it. Okay. We are starting with the Psyker. So the Psyker is definitely, the most generic of all of the science fiction flavor-wise arcane backgrounds. They are the space wizard, of science fiction. The very vanilla kind of choice. Yeah, I mean, this and the next two, I'll say probably my least favorite just overall as far as mechanics and flavor goes. But yeah, let's get into it. So the Psyker is, uses psionic smarts. They get 3 powers to choose from, 10 power points. They have the absolutely biggest list in all of these arcane backgrounds. They pretty much have access to everything, even healing, but it's self only. So there's different trappings besides just telepathy. We're talking about telekinesis, electrokinesis, fire, psycho, whatever, pyrokinesis, all those things, right? ESP. So just everything is there for you to kind of make your own. And then they may take the edges that require psychic background, which is the mentalist edge. On its right, I mean, it's just the most generic. It's pretty much exactly the same as the arcane background found in normal Suede. So there's really not much here to talk about. I mean, it is the biggest one out of all of them. They do have 2 exclusive edges. So the first one is Scan, which is a kind of a cool always on power. There is some problems with it I have though, but within 10 inches, which is a pretty good range, you can sense all sapient minds, whether you can see them or not. And it says you can't read the minds, but you detect the direction and distance to each and any particular strong emotion, anger, fear, joy, etc. Now they give some examples of how this might be useful. This can be a handy tool trying to identify a hidden enemy. This totally makes sense, right? You can't see them, but they're hidden away and they probably have adrenaline going. Detect the location of a bound or hapless victim. Again, makes total sense. Then pick out the leader of a mob. Now, this one I'm not quite sure, just based on what the mechanics of this are, as far as like just sensing the emotions. Like the mob is the leader one is just more confident than the rest. Like I'm not sure because you're not reading thoughts, you're not reading minds, you're just kind of reading emotions, kind of like what's her name, Deanna Troi from Star Trek: The Next Generation, right? Or even quickly navigate the best route through a crowd. Again, not really sure just on its own how that really would work. I guess you're sensing all the minds, so you just kind of know where you can be, which is all fine. I mean, it's a cool ability. There's a lot more that you can do with it. The part that hampers me is that, there's 2 parts, but scan lasts as long as the Psyker concentrates, but she's distracted while it's active. So number 1, there's no description here about whether it causes an action to go on or off or a free action to go on and off, So if you kind of go into this during combat, like how do you turn it off and on? Or if you are in combat and there's somebody that's invisible or you can't find somebody and you want to turn it on, is it a free action or an action? I based on what it kind of does, I would say a free action is probably fine. Like free action on your turn is fine, right? I don't know if you really need to do an action. The distracted part is probably my least favorite part about it. I mean, it makes sense that you have some drawback when you're using it if you're concentrating. The problem is that a lot of the effects I can think of, especially the ones they've listed, like the leader of the mob or through the crowd, might require another skill check, right? Like, because you're like if you're trying to decipher how somebody's lying, you might need to then roll something and you might get a bonus, but then you're distracted, which means that, anything you're trying to do with a skill is a -2. So I don't know. To me, it's kind of goes against itself, if that makes sense. I probably, if I was a game master, I would probably allow the person to switch it to just being vulnerable, and it would last until the end of your next turn, just kind of normal. Even when you turn it off, you would just still be vulnerable until the end of your next turn. And probably as a limited free action, you can turn it off or on. It's probably how I would rule it, just because, it's not the most powerful ability for an edge. It's certainly cool. I love the flavor of it. Anything that gives you, it first of all, it gives you a lot of flavor that the Psyker, the base Psyker just doesn't have at all, right? Besides you just giving your own flavor to it because it's the most generic arcane background template. But this is like a lot of flavor. I mean, it has specifically a telepathy flavor, which might not be your thing. You know, if you're choosing like a telekinesis or electrokinesis or pyrokinesis, things like that. But it's there if you're telepathic or you have a mix of abilities. And it's like a superpower, right? It's always on. You don't have to spend power points. You don't have to roll to see if it will turn on or off. I just wish that there was, the distracted part is because oftentimes I just can imagine people rolling a skill on top of using this ability. So that's my take on Scan. Oh, and one thing, let's also talk about some of the things that Psykers do get. Again, that's kind of hidden in there is they have access to a couple of new powers that other ones don't get. So first of all, they actually get two direct damage abilities. Which is pretty unique because usually we just have Bolt as our kind of direct damage ability. And then you could kind of think Banish is almost one for certain type of entities. So the first one that we have is Telekinetic Squeeze. Now this is also found later in the Sith, basically in their Jedi version, in the Sith edge. You get access to Telekinetic Squeeze, which makes sense, but the Psykers also get access to it. So it is a seasoned power at 3 power points with smarts times 2. Basically, there's a lot of different ways the flavor can be here. One thing I want to point out is that it can be loudly or quietly. So you could, within your flavor, this might be a good power if you want to kill somebody, very subtly, right? There's no necessarily any visual effects that are happening. Like if your thing is just like damaging their brain or something, or their airflow or their heart rate, right? You might not like hear or see anything. So it might be a good kind of power for like an assassin-y type character. But they say regardless of how it manifests, it's an opposed roll between the caster's arcane skill and the victim's vigor. And because of the refinement necessarily, it actually suffers a -2 on the roll. So success inflicts a 2d10 that ignores everything but magical armor. So you don't, no armor kind of comes into play there. And a raise adds a bonus die as usual. So that means you add a d6. You don't add a d10, you add a d6. And then it says, doesn't affect undead, constructs, or other creatures without biological systems. Okay, makes sense. So there's a couple things to go into here, like especially if we're comparing this to Bolt, whether kind of a better one. They definitely both have their place. Just as far as damage goes, so here's Bolt. As you can see, okay, I don't need this, I don't know what that is. Bolt is a 1-point power with the same distance, but when you upgrade it with the damage modifier, it does 3d6 damage or 46 with the rage. So, Bolt is a ranged attack. It does suffer cover and illumination, so it has smarts times 2. So similar to Telekinetic Squeeze, and they do similar damage, like 2d10 versus 3d6 is pretty similar. 2d10, if our die didn't ace, that would be like 0.5 better on average. But because of acing, I think Bolt will outdamage Telekinetic Squeeze generally. And same thing with the raise, right? It's exactly the same. You just have a higher chance of getting of acing when you have a 46 versus 2d10 and 1d6. It's pretty interesting here as far as comparing the two. I don't know if I would have both. Telekinetic Squeeze is definitely better against somebody who's in a lot of armor, right? Because you're just ignoring all of that armor. So somebody in power armor, it would be awesome to cast that on them. But it is going against vigor, so anybody that's kind of a martial character is probably going to have pretty good vigor. The -2 is what makes it kind of worse, in my opinion. I mean, that's pretty prohibitive. That's a big drawback. Opposed rolls are kind of built to be a little bit stronger to the defender's favor because most of the time opposed rolls are going against from a player character to an NPC, and usually an extra. So it's kind of in their favor where you have to roll and you don't know whether you've succeeded or not, right? They still get to roll. So with Bolt, you definitely know if you're going to hit or not, right? With Telekinetic Squeeze, you don't. And with that -2 is a very, very big penalty. Now, we are a psychic, and I don't know why these are popping up now. So we do have access to this edge, the Psychic Edge, Mentalist, which gives us a +2 on opposed psionics rolls, which, Telekinetic Squeeze is, right? It's an opposed psionics roll. So that gets rid of the penalty, but you are kind of taking an edge to then get rid of the penalty. Again, I think it has its place, and there's some cool factor to it. It has a place of being much more subtle than Bolt. It also has its place if you're going against a lot of high armored enemy, not magical armor, but like, creatures that have high armor, or people in, intense body armor or power armor, or even like the pilot, if you can kind of see them, a pilot in like robot armor, things like that. So it definitely has its place. Second of all, they have the backwash, which is another interesting one. Again, another direct damage power, and they're the only ones that get access to it. Same exact power point, same exact range. It's allows the Psyker to send a powerful and dangerous surge via any mental link. They said if an ally is a subject of Puppet, for example, they can use Backwash to send it back to the person who casts Puppet on them. So here's the mechanics of it, though. The Psyker chooses the character within range, so within that Smarts times 2 range, who is currently affected by another character's power. Now, it's interesting here. They don't say mental power. In the flavor, they do say via any mental link, and they specifically call it Puppet. But in the actual mechanics, right, they don't call out a mental effect. And other places, they do call that out. So, it's going to be up to your game master. I would say it's already kind of a niche targeting anyways. So I think it's fine to allow, it's any power. It's not just a psychic power or a mental power, right? But character's power, benign or otherwise, which again is a very important point. That means that it's not just casting on your allies who are affected by an enemy's power, which would make it very, very niche as far as targeting goes. It also affects, your enemies who are getting buffed by maybe a more powerful person that's perhaps hiding. So if you're successful with that roll, a powerful blast of energy, and it does 3d6, 46 with the rage, so exactly the same as an improved damage bolt. And again, only magical armor can protect against it. So this is the best damage out of the three of them, in my opinion. I mean, it ignores all the magical armor. It does 3d6 or 46 with the raise. The really cool thing is that, like I said, the cooler part of not just of your allies, but targeting somebody who's been buffed, an enemy who's been buffed. That means even if the range then doesn't matter, like you just have to be within range of them. But if the other person is hiding, 20 inches away in a bunker, being like, okay, minions, do this. I've cast like a buff on you. You can affect them. You can damage them. So that's like a really, really cool, unique power. Again, it's pretty niche, but along with Telekinetic Squeeze, I think it has its place alongside of Bolt. If you're in a game where there is, definitely want to be in a game where people who have powers are frequent enough, right? So definitely something to hold off into and just kind of wait and see. Or if you know that you're going against in a game where there's a lot of people with powers, then definitely worth taking, because out of all the, while the targeting itself is niche, it has kind of a very unique and powerful ability. And again, this is not a target, so you don't have to worry about cover. You don't have to worry about like illumination. It's not an opposed roll. It's just a success. You just have to get a 4. So that's an awesome thing too, is that out of all of them, it's the most reliable, is that you know exactly what you're getting is for a 4. And there's a lot of other things that can defend against that, right? Having dodge is not going to help you. So really, really cool, unique power. I just, again, don't just have it on mental powers, because that would make it very niche. Okay, back to the psychic ones. We talked about Scan. Now let's talk about Tower of Will. It gives you +4 on any roll made to oppose, resist, or recover from mental intrusions. So here's one where they're specifically calling that out, such as Mind Reading, Mind Wipe, or Puppet, or abilities based on those powers. So arcane casters who are casting those things on you, or like creatures who have the ability to do like mind control, things like that. And it stacks with any other bonuses. This one's just okay. It is very niche. I mean, even in a game where you're facing off against a lot of, Psykers or Psionics or creatures with those abilities, it's still pretty niche. I mean, we're only getting this +4 to a very specific subset of powers. And before that, like, we have other things. I mean, there's the Mentalist one, which also protects you from those. It gives you a +2, but it also gives you a +2 for you. And now it's only for opposing rolls, but I'm pretty sure all of those powers, most of those kind of mental powers, are opposed rolls anyways. So this gives you a +2 to resist it and a +2 to do your own opposed rolls. So in my opinion, much better. And then we have Arcane Resistance, which would people suffer -2 to target you and you take -2 damage. Again, that might be better before that, so it's a seasoned edge. We just have so many things we want to take at seasoned. When you're a martial character or an arcane background that you're focusing on, seasoned really opens up. And I just find it hard to imagine me, maybe eventually if I was in a game that there was a lot of mental intrusion type abilities and powers being cast on me, I might take it. I mean, +4 is a huge bonus, but yeah, I don't know. It's very specific. And that's the Psyker, completely. Again, very vanilla. I would say the most disappointing thing that I have about it is that both, its base one doesn't really have any flavor, which I think is by design, right? It's supposed to be the most kind of open-ended, but the edges themselves are both telepathically based edges. I really would have liked to see some other edges here to kind of showcased, telekinesis, or I mean, we had to kind of have the gravity one, but it's not quite the same. Or energy-based people who can cast, fire or ice or electricity, right? I would have liked to see some more options for them. This is kind of like both of the edges are just for telepathy, so a little bit of a disappointment for me, and a pretty vanilla arcane background all around. Okay, let's move on to the Shepherd. So this is our second space cleric. They talk about here that they protect their flocks and they're around a community and they tap into something that's very mysterious. They leave this very open. Again, this is next to Psyker. This is also kind of the most open-ended, kind of vanilla of all of the arcane backgrounds we've seen so far, I would say. So they just leave it up to you. They also say that they're natural leaders, so they often have leadership edges. But there's no support for leadership stuff in here, unlike the chaplain, and that's. With this one, my biggest problem is that we already have the chaplain, and the chaplain has a very specific flavor and has all of these interesting abilities. This one doesn't, and I'm very confused why both of these exist. I would have liked to see these combined, but let's get into it. So it starts with, it's a faith-based caster. You get boost trait, healing, and one other from the list, which is exactly the same as the chaplain. You start with 10 power points. The power list is almost the exact same as the chaplain. The chaplain has some more like control-y powers, offensive powers. This has some more like utility powers, so a little bit more on the passive-y side, or not passive, but like non-combative side. They can take the miracle edge, which is a holy warrior. Exactly the same as the chaplain. They have a vow, major vow, again. And while the chaplain had the mercy edge, which is a pretty awesome edge, they have the aura of courage, which I think first showed up in Savage Pathfinder for the paladin. But basically in a 10-inch radius, it gives +1 to fear checks and subtracts 1 from the fear table results to allies only. So pretty disappointing in this one, if I'm being honest. Like the flavor, again, it's another space cleric. We have chaplain, which is already a space cleric, which I think can be easily modified to fit different roles. But just, I mean, how can I not compare them, right? The Aura of Courage is just a much worse ability, and I find it hard-pressed to even consider that a full edge. I mean, again, if you're in a game where there's a lot of fear checks, like I played a Lost Colony, a Deadlands Lost Colony, and there's a ton of fear checks in that, so if you're in a game with a lot of fear checks, this has use, right? But it's only within a 10-inch radius, and it's not something like where leadership edges where you might be able to, be in radio contact and kind of increase that. So when fear checks happen, and they might not happen that much, your allies also have to be next to you, which probably will be the case, but not always. So there's a very good chance a fear check could finally happen, and maybe some, or maybe not even any of your allies are within those 10 inches. So just kind of a little bit of a, again, the vow isn't that big of a hindrance. It's just kind of right? I feel this is pretty excuse me. So then we have their two edges, and again, the edges here really fall flat for me. I mean, out of all of the arcane backgrounds, I think Shepherd falls the flattest for me, by far. So the first one we have is Alone Against the Wolves. Where they say, Shepherds must often stand alone against their foes, surrounded by vicious Xenos, savage beasts, or oppressive enemies. And basically, it increases your toughness by your gang up bonus. I mean, this one just flavor-wise completely falls flat for me because the name of the arcane background is the Shepherd, right? Their whole point is that you are a guardian of your flock. And, their aura of courage is all about being next to them and people being protecting them. They're talking about, being leadership edges, and their flock is their whole thing. So, I mean, flavor-wise, you're supposed to be in your, surrounded by your friends or behind your friends and overwatching them, protecting them, right? But you're also, mechanically, you're the space cleric. Like, you're the healer. Your friends should be guarding you. If you're constantly surrounded by people enough to justify that edge, by enemies, then they're doing it wrong, right? Your other companions are playing the game wrong in some ways. I mean, nobody really plays the game wrong, but they're playing it wrong, right? Just weird. I mean, it's not even that good of ability, really, anyways, but it just completely goes against the entire flavor, I would say, of what the Shepherd's supposed to be. I mean, this makes way more sense to me than the Chaplain, whose whole thing is like being attached to some type of military regiment or battalion or group, right? And fighting against Xenos, I don't know. To me, I just feel like that is definitely a Chaplain edge. So again, kind of falls flat as far as flavor, and the mechanics are just not that great. Unless if you're in a game where there's tons of beasts constantly attacking you, and then it would be worth it. It's not bad, but just falls flat as far as flavor goes. And then the next one you have is Mercy, which the Chaplain just gets. So it's just a weird choice for me that the Shepherd can take Mercy, and then they would be kind of do what the chaplain does. So very odd. I mean, in my case, I would just say combine them, right? Just only have the chaplain be the space cleric, and have Alone Against the Wolves and have the Aura of Courage be edges that they can take. Just expand upon the chaplain, right? Because the chaplain's other edges are already kind of different play styles, and this would also be kind of unique edges that they can take. So that's what I would say, is just combine them. Again, the Shepherd, just on its base, is just pretty meh, and the edges are just weird picks. Again, Mercy's not a bad edge, but the chaplain already has it in their base kit, so kind of confused why it's there. So combine them. Okay, well, that was I would say the kind of the worst part of the Arcane Backgrounds, and now we're getting to some of my favorite ones. The rest of the ones are awesome, and they really hit it out of the park as far as flavor and mechanics. So yeah, let's get into it. Okay, the Shifter. Really cool. So the Shifter is able to change their body, whether it's some type of the mutation or nanomachines, right, or nanites, or some type of arcane weirdness, whatever reason, they can shift their bodies. So they are another focus-based caster. Very cool. They get the starting powers of Disguise and Shape Change. So that's 2 powers, and they get 15 power points. So again, this is starting a little bit stronger because they get 2 powers. Although I will say that they're both set powers, and they're both do similar things. So it's actually not as strong as it might look. I mean, it definitely makes sense for their flavor. They talk about them being corporate espionage and agents, like spies, right? But they both kind of do the same thing. Disguise is used as far as for espionage and spying type gameplay, and honestly, shape change is that's what's mostly good for. If you see shape change and think, oh, that could be like the way I do combat, I would say that without being buffed, like druids in Savage Pathfinder get a buff to it, it's really not that good in combat. I mean, you have to spend an action on your turn just to activate it, and then you can start using it, right? And it lasts for only 5 rounds, so you don't get to keep it up. So not actually the best to be using in combat with some type of way of buffing it, but good for espionage because, I mean, in this case, Disguise is used when you're in like a city situation, right? Urban situation, and Shape Change might be used if you're in a wilderness situation and you need to like sneak in and look at stuff and get, whatever, do your espionage stuff. So it definitely has its place, but those are the 2 powers that you start with are very, very narrow focus. I think most of the Arcane Backgrounds that start with certain powers either give you a free one to choose from or they're versatile enough. I think this one is the most very specific as far as what it can allow you to do, but you can always take the new powers edge. Still strong because you start with the 15 power points, which is a big bonus. That's always, to me, starting with 15 power points is better than starting with 3 powers and 10 power points, if that makes sense, because PowerPoint edge is limited to once per rank. So pretty limited power list here, but it makes sense because they're all kind of things that you can, change your body in, right? They have the Gifted Hindrance, which is awesome. We love extra effort. It's the strongest one in Suede. And then they have the Internal Focus. This is the kind of drawback. So all their powers have the personal limitation, and they don't get any bonuses from that. So usually with the personal limitation, if, say, you have a 3-point power like Boost Trait, it would reduce that to 1 power point. And if it's a cheaper power, you get a bonus to the activation roll. In this case, you don't get any benefits. Now, something that I also want to point out on just Boost Trait is a great example. When you have something that is already making it be a self only, right? Then the aspect limitation of Boost Trait, Lower Trait also doesn't give you any bonus because limitations have to actually be a limitation to get you any reduction in points. So because the power is already self only, Lower Trait, not having access to Lower Trait isn't a limitation because you're not going to be casting on yourself. So in this case, having Boost Trait is going to be 3 power points. If you further took it and decided, okay, I want to make it like boost strength, boost athletics, boost fighting, and boost, agility, then that would be a 1 or 2 point power reduction because that is a limitation. But otherwise, it's not a limitation. But okay, that's their drawback. Then they get Slow Regeneration, which is Slow Regeneration is once per day. You can make a natural healing roll, where Fast Regeneration is once per round. Now, regeneration is always kind of there's been many forum posts. I've posted before about how does regeneration actually work when you get to do it. There's not really any clear ruling on slow regeneration. I would say though, to actually make sense and to be mechanically relevant, especially in a science fiction game where there's power-based healing and there's a lot of technological-based healing, is that basically the shifter player can choose whenever they want to activate their natural healing once per day. So once they activate it, they can't use it until the next day. But it's the only way that it makes sense. You know, waiting till the morning is just silly in my opinion, because they'll probably get healed before then. So just allow them, like, you know, that's what I did in my Savage Fallout game. The ghouls who, when they're subject to radiation, they get natural healing once per day. And that's how I allow them to do it. And I think it's the only way that makes sense and actually makes it a worthwhile pro, right? A worthwhile mechanic to have. So all in all, there's definitely a lot of cool flavor here with the natural healing and, you know, the self-only powers. There's enough flavor here where you feel like the shifter, and very strong, as we can see. Like, the internal focus, is that a major hindrance? I mean, yeah, it's kind of bordering major hindrance. It is a lot more power points for being self-only, but, you know, when your whole flavor is being self, then you know, yeah, it is worth a major hindrance, but you are starting pretty strong because slow regeneration is worth an edge. So I think it's a little bit strong with starting with that extra power, even though they're set powers. But the edges for Shifter is where it really gets interesting and awesome. So we start with Gelatinous, which has 2 abilities in it, which is a passive ability and an active ability. So the passive ability means they have no vital organs, which means that you take half damage from falling or collisions, like if you're in a car in a chase scene and there's a collision. And call shots do no extra damage from them. And the only call shots that do that are like head vital damage shots. Aren't like limb shots, don't do anything. So pretty cool, but pretty niche. Again, you know, you're not often falling that much. Collisions happen very rarely. I mean, I would say, in my experience, Game Masters don't really do call shots that much, but that can vary. I know as a Game Master, I try to do them sometimes. But, you know, you can kind of, as a shifter character, maybe you don't wear a helmet just to kind of get that going. I would say that if you are a game master and a player chooses Gelatinous, then definitely have your smarter enemies doing called shots, right? Because you, as a game master, know they have this ability, but those people might not know. So if they're like a soldier coming in, and they see the shifter without a helmet, or they just, you know, they're pointed out, have them do a headshot, right? And yeah, you're not getting the bonus for it, but that would make the player who chose Gelatinous think, oh, that's awesome. Like my ability came into play, right? So that's kind of something with game masters. You're always trying to kind of do things to them where their abilities actually matter, right? It's hard to remember all the time, but that's what I recommend. The second ability here is that you can make an athletics roll as an action, and you can ooze through grates or large openings as for difficult terrain, which means 2 inches. It means every inch costs 2 inches instead of 1. So usually if you have a pace of 6, you can move 3 inches, right? Small cracks in the leg take 1d6 rounds to seep through, leaving the character vulnerable until she reforms. So really, really awesome. I mean, altogether, this is basically superpowers, right? Which I love. And this is so much flavor about what the shifter's about. And having it just be on all the time and be able to use it all the time is just awesome. So this one, again, mechanically isn't that strong, but it really, really, really is good on flavor. And the seeping ability is pretty awesome, especially with the kind of flavor of the shifter being an intrusion expert, right? Being able to, you know, do your disguise, walk into the facility, and then ooze into a grate and get into, you know, under doors, stuff like that. It's cool for role playing. You can play around with it. So really cool. The only thing here that I don't make sense to me is the athletics roll. I mean, one, for their choice of skill, athletics. I mean, I don't know why it's not just a focus roll, right? Because you're not like, athletics is kind of the catch-all for like physical stuff, but you're turning your body to ooze. The other ways that you shift around to use disguise and shape change are focus. So in my opinion, I would definitely have them use focus, but I don't even think you should do a roll. I think it should just be an action, because, you know, maybe in combat it makes sense. I don't know how often you're using this in combat, but like out of combat, which is going to be using this most of the time, they can just keep rolling, right, until they do it, because there's no fail effect here. There's no critical effect, fail effect here. So I just think, especially if it's out of combat, just let them do it as an action. Like, who cares, right? It's not that powerful of ability anyway. So Gelatinous, again, A++ on flavor, you know, probably like B- as far as mechanics go. But just because that it's on all the time is really cool. And then they get Morph. And Morph is awesome. It's basically 4.5 edges in one. I love when an edge gives you multiple choices to choose from. There's just so much flexibility. So that's what it is. So as an action, as a limited action, you can just take on one of these kind of abilities, and it lasts until you either go down, until you're incapacitated, or you just choose to do a different one. So again, 4 of these are equal to full edges, and 1 is equal to a half edge. So first we have Camouflage. So +2 to stealth, +4 to be completely motionless. This is equal to the Camouflage ability. Oh yeah, I was pointing out Brave before for the Shepherd. I would probably take that over to the Radiant. Anyways, so Camouflage. This is the As you can see, there's a 2-point ability of camouflage that gives you the same effect, and that is equal to an edge. In 2 points of ancestry creation rules is equal to an edge. So that's clearly an edge. Now, they don't say here, there's no other like subscript about like, you know, how you actually getting the camouflage. Here they actually talk about that the bonus is halved if more than half the character's skin is covered by clothing, unless also camouflage to match the environment. And the character gets no bonus completely covered. Now, again, I don't really know here what's supposed to be. I mean, it'd be much stronger if that's not the case. But like, if your shifter is wearing armor, there's nothing really in the flavor text that says like they can morph over the armor, or you can like Odo over the armor or something. You know, I don't really know. So I would assume it's going to be exactly the same as the camouflage ability found in the ancestry creation rules found in the science fiction companion. So, but still very cool. Then they get claws, which is equal to an edge. Fleet-footed, again, which is just straight an edge. I don't even know if that stacks with the fleet-footed edge because it's called the same thing. Hardy. Really, really good tanking ability. And then they get reach 1, that's the one equal to half an edge. So, I mean, like, you can see this is just awesome flexibility. I would say that like most of the time you're probably kind of sticking to one in combat, like claws, fleet-footed, or hardy, right? But there is some flexibility there where if you're like in a huge open map, then yeah, go with fleet-footed, right? If you need that movement and you're kind of a more melee character. But hardy is always a good option to choose, right? And that kind of makes you, if you have gelatinous and hardy, that makes you can really lean into being a kind of tanky character here. You know, if you're doing claws, you're probably leaning into claws and taking martial artist and taking brawler, but it's still kind of a really good always on weapon that you have access to. But like, you know, so normally you're kind of choosing one of those, and then stealth, camouflage when you're kind of, you know, sneaking around and you don't want to spend your stuff on disguise or shape change or whatever. So again, shifter, I mean, A+ on flavor. All in all, definitely an A as far as mechanics go. Just some really cool, unique things that you can do. So I really, really love Shifter. They did a really good job here. All right, let's move on to the Star Knight, which is obviously a Jedi. They had to put this in here. So another focus-based caster. Now, I would have thought a Jedi probably isn't a full arcane background. You know, it definitely is. You'll see that the mechanics here are leading into being a Gish. And Gishes are definitely hard to do with just a normal arcane background and all your martial stuff, right? Because casting powers takes up your act. That's why Mystic Powers is so good, because it's a free action to do, and you don't have to, you know, increase another kind of primary skill besides your fighting, right? But it is what it is. So you get 3 powers to start from and 10 power points. Now they give you deflection and protection, which is kind of a weird choice in my opinion. This is kind of the worst of set powers that I've seen, because these are both the big defensive powers, right? I mean, the arcane protection is also one of them, but these are the 2 main defensive powers. And normally when I do arcane backgrounds and when I help people out if they have, you know, want my opinion on doing their power list, I say like, you know, try to have powers that fit different situations. You want to be flexible. So when I do an arcane background, unless I'm really focusing on a specific thing, I like to have like a defensive power, a mobile power, you know, maybe some type of buff or debuff, a control power, things like that. I like to mix and have like a more well-rounded power list, because that will allow you to use your powers in most situations. And if I take deflection or protection, I'm not taking the other one, right? I'm just taking one of those because I want other powers. So, you know, they kind of, I guess, have their use as far as like when one is better, but honestly, I would just want to have one. So kind of a strange choice here, but yeah, you get 2 of those and 1 other from the list. The list is very small and obviously inspired by Jedis, right? Excuse me. And then they have the energy weapon, so they get the lightsaber, right? So they devote themselves to the energy style melee weapons. They automatically start with the trademark weapon edge in energy style weapons, or specific energy sword in their energy sword. And they gain an energy sword. And they said that you may trade that in for a different laser weapon. I think they mean energy weapon. That was a typo. If desired, playing the difference in cost of starting fun. So let's get into energy weapons. So here we kind of have a full edge in trademark weapon, and then we have basically, which kind of amounts to having $750 extra, but there's a little bit more to it than that, but let's get into it. So here we go. So first of all, there's 2 energy weapons in the game that are listed, and that's the energy sword, which is obviously what we start with. And that little symbol there means it's a tier 3 item, which is the highest technological option, and that's kind of the bonus here that's a little bit hidden. But basically, you know, you can see it does pretty good damage, you know, strength plus d6, but for a d4 weapon. So again, you need very low strength, although you might that kind of leans into maybe like not really upping your strength that much, but you might want to, but that you can definitely get by with as a Jedi with having very low strength, which definitely goes into somebody who's more interested in being a caster and having a lightsaber versus a full-on, like, you know, more of the warrior type of Jedi or whatever. And it's a D4, yeah, it's a D4 minimum strength. AP, that's the AP4. It costs 2 pounds. It has cauterized, heavy weapon, parry +1. Now, what this is just a rapier with the energy weapon trait added on, and we'll get into that. And then there's the energy pike, which is just, again, the pike with the energy weapon put on. So when they talk about choosing a different energy weapon, I would say you can choose one of these, or you can just choose any other normal melee weapon found in Suede, and add on this energy quality that you see here. So as you can see, it increases weapon damage of die type, adds AP4, adds heavy weapon, and they automatically have the cauterized property, which, incapacitated enemies add +2 to keep rolling out. And you can see it's $750. So it makes sense that, so a rapier is 150, so that's why it equals 900. So it's clearly a rapier that has had the energy one put on. But like I said, also it is a powered weapon, which means it has to have a, it says except molecular blades and psychic blades require an attached battery at Dev 1 or Dev 2. So because the energy sword is, I mean, they should have said that in this. I don't know why they didn't, but the energy weapon is a Dev 3 weapon. So that is kind of a bonus that you don't have to have, the extra pounds of weight. You don't have to trade in the battery, right? So even if you're in a lower tech game, you somehow have access to this ancient weapon, right? It's kind of how the Jedi are, is like the creation of this is kind of lost to time, and we just have these, we just kind of reuse them to make them again. So that's kind of the hidden bonus I was talking about. And then here we go, like, so these are all ones that you can put on as far as the energy weapon. To me, the kind of call outs here are the spear and the staff, besides the rapier, right? And of course, the katana is going to be one that a lot of people want, which is also pretty cool, but very expensive. But yeah, the spear is really good. I mean, if you look at it, strength D6, D6 minimum strength, so it would go to strength D8, only 3 pounds. It only costs 100, so it's cheaper than the rapier. And then you have reach 1 and parry +1 if you use them both hands. So a little bit more damage than the rapier, higher damage, minimum damage, but reach 1 is awesome, and you still get that parry. And the staff, again, is if you're going for a weaker one, it has reach 1, so just kind of better than the rapier in my opinion. So yeah, so really, really cool. Let's see what I have here. Yeah, okay. So that's what they get. So what's their drawbacks? Well, they have the armor interference, which is kind of similar to the ones we've seen in Savage Pathfinder and the Fantasy Companion. And basically, they subtract 4 from just their focus rolls with any type of armor that adds more than 2+2 protection. Now, in the Fantasy Companion, this would be considered a minor hindrance, but I definitely think in this companion, this is a major hindrance. Why do I think that? Well, if you can see here, this is the armor that you get in this companion. And the only one that's less than +4 is the smart sleeve and the synth mesh suit. Which the synth mesh suit is cool because it just looks like clothing. It gives you +2. But why I consider that a major hindrance is that when you're going into combat situations, there's the body armor, right? The body armor is a minimum strength of a D4, so everybody can use it. It gives +4 armor, and it has ballistic protection, which means that people using ballistics, they subtract like 2 or 4 damage. So because the body armor exists, that's why to me, it's like, everybody's going to be having the body armor. It's only $200. It's a D4 minimum strength. Everybody's going to be having it. Even your weak arcane casters are going to be having it. So to me, that equals kind of a major hindrance, right? And then there's the Code of Honor hindrance, which is a kind of role-playing one. Totally makes sense as far as Jedi are concerned, but it is a role-playing only one. So if you have a different take on Jedi, your Star Knights, whatever, or you want to play like a Sithy character, or you want to play somebody who maybe was a Jedi and fallen, or who was a Sith and is kind of fallen from the Sith, right? From the bad dark side, then you could definitely switch this out for a different major hindrance that makes sense. I would say don't be beholden to this being in here. And then they talk about that, of course. It's Savage Worlds, right? We can customize everything. So just totally makes sense to switch this out for a different major hindrance. Now, so you see here, we kind of have 2 major hindrances. And what we get in that is the energy weapon. So does trademark weapon and access to an energy blade really make up for it? I mean, again, there's no perfect balance here. Code of Honor is role-playing only, so I think it's totally fine, right? Mechanically, it's fine, but it's cool and it makes sense. Okay, so Star Knight has a lot of edges to get through. They start with the laser parry edge, Basically, this kind of acts like dodge, but in my opinion, it's a little bit worse, but it's different. So basically, if they have their energy weapon out, they're aware of the attack, so same as dodge, they subtract 2 from shooting rolls to hit them. If they take the defend option, they subtract 4 from shooting rolls instead. You're not cumulative with cover, but it does stack with dodge. So, dodge is just ranged rolls. So that means like not just shooting rolls, that also means like thrown athletics rolls. That means like powers like bolt, right? So this is much more specific to shooting rolls specifically. But it makes defend, which normally defend. I don't see people using defend that often, right? Defend is mostly used when somebody wants to get kind of like disengage in D&D, when you want to get away from a melee person without getting a hit on them. Most of the time, spending your whole turn to do defend. So here, I'll just bring up defend. Oh, okay, we'll get back to that. But so here's defend. It increases your parry by 4 and you use your whole turn, so you can't do multi-actions. So it's usually pretty bad generally. You're just much better just using your turn to do something, but it definitely has it's cool that it's there, right? But this then makes defend be able to defend against shooting rolls. So you're getting the bonus of defense as far as parry, and you're getting the bonus of defense as far as shooting rolls, right? So if you could kind of put yourself in a strategic position and defend, I will say though that like, because it's shooting rolls, that means it's mostly going to be people with guns. Those people are generally more intelligent than something that might be able to like, throw something at you, or like a creature that can throw something at you. But, they might not just, the thing with defend is there's no guarantee they're going to target you, right? If I saw a Jedi who was like putting their lightsaber up and that's what they were spending all their time doing, and I see like somebody over there that's like, behind them, I might just focus on them, right? If I was a smart enemy. So there's no guarantee. So just going back to what I saw before, they do have access to a specific power called Prediction, which it was also in the Chronomancer. So I actually missed it in the Chronomancer bringing it up, but it's one of the other ones. Again, that's a new power that's only found in Chronomancer and Jedi. So it's a 5 power point power, range of self. Basically, when you cast it, you get 3 prediction tokens, and that allows you to, anyone within range of smarts, you can reroll any trait or damage roll. And once it expires, you lose the token. So this is very similar to the Bard Inspire Courage, or Inspire Heroics edge. But it allows you to do it on yourself, but you only have 3 tokens. So, basically this is a value as far as a Benny's worth 5 power points. So this is like value of 2, because it's like you're spending 5. You're spending a Benny to then get 3 kind of reroll Bennies, right? If that makes sense. But you have to spend an action to do it, which sucks, right? I really would have liked to see this. I mean, they don't really. It'd be cool if this was a free action, because I just, the cost here for me is more about the action than not, right? Because then you might be doing your whole turn just doing this. Good buffs to your player, to other people, but it's still a cool power. Like, I definitely like it, but, I feel like it could be a little bit better if it was a free action or something, but definitely worth it. Okay. So, then we have Laser Reflect, which needs the Laser Parry Edge. So, when you defend, you can attempt to redirect 1 ranged attack. So, what's weird here is that it's not a shooting roll, right? Remember, defend gave you a bonus against shooting rolls only. Here, they're saying Laser Reflect works against a range attack. So again, not sure if that's what they meant. I think they just mean shooting rolls. But anyways. If a range attack misses you and you chose the defend option, then you can choose a new target, then you make a fighting roll, and the range is always 6 inches, 12, 24, so pretty short range. And if a failure, it doesn't do anything. On a success, does the normal weapon damage of who shot at you, and a raise does bonus damage. This one's just okay. I do think it's a bit underpowered. I mean, first of all, there's a lot of kind of gates you have to get through to actually have it do anything, right? First of all, you have to take the Laser Parry edge. Then you have to take this edge, right, to even have it do something. Then you have to have taken the defend option. Then they have to have missed you. Then you have to roll fighting roll, which, probably is your best skill. So it does a range attack on fighting, which is kind of cool. And then, of course, you have to get a success or a rage. If we compare this to counterattack, right? Counterattack, just once you take it, it's just on. And if somebody misses you, you get to make an attack against them. So this has a lot more stuff to kind of go through. And again, you have to take the defend option. So that's giving up your entire turn to then have this maybe happen. And it's only once per turn. Then the improved laser effect enables you to do 3 misses per turn, which is, again, this followed the same the same framework as counterattack. But again, I just think counterattack is going to be better, and unless you're not facing off against a lot of melee people. So personally, what I would do as a game master, I would just buff it in that Laser Reflect allows you to do it up to 3 times, and Improve Laser Reflect allows you to do it 5 times or something. I would just buff the amount of time that you can do it, just because it's like, I don't know. Again, there's a lot of steps to go through to actually have it happen, but it is a very it's a key part of being a Jedi, right? Is reflecting these bolts, so they have to have it in there. Okay. Then we have Star Knave and Star Wizard. These are mutually exclusive edges. Star Knave is kind of Sithy. Star Wizard is kind of the good side, and Star Knave is the dark side, but not necessarily, right? They're leaving it a little bit open to how your game is, or even within Star Wars, there's plenty of people who aren't Jedis or Sith that use different, parts of the Force, whatever. So they basically they give you 1 power, and they give you a bunch of new powers from the list. So Star Knave gives you Burst Lightning, Disguise, Drain Power Points, Intangibility, Mind Whip, Resurrection, and Telekinetic Squeeze. So there's the other, Darth Vader, Telekinetic Squeeze. Star Wizard gives you Blind, Dark Side, Disguise, Dispel, Fear, Fly, Healing, Illusion, Light, Darkness, Relief, Sloth, Speed, and Sound Silence. So, I definitely think Star Wizard has a little bit better list selection there. I mean, Sloth Speed being one of them. Speed is one of the best buffs in the game if you're a martial character. But it's all about flavor, and these are definitely worth it. I mean, getting 1 power plus an expanse to our list, it's interesting because like the base one, is already kind of. It's having a small list is definitely already a drawback, so it's not like it's like buffing you so much, right? But they're cool that they're here, and definitely something that I would consider taking, of course, right? Then we have Stellar Ascension, which is kind of just there as like it's a legendary edge, and if you die, you become an energy form, right? You get the energy form ability and the ethereal special ability. You can actually interact with somebody, but you can still cast powers on them. So sucks if you are mostly want the martial route, but still kind of a cool. I mean, it's just kind of a fun thing to do at the end of a campaign, I guess. And if you die, you still get to be your character, right, and give advice to people and stuff like that. So overall, it's a Jedi, right? I would say that. With the armor interference and the whole thing, like I definitely see some people here just taking this to get access to the energy sword, have laser parry, laser reflect, those kind of things, and not really worrying about powers at all. You could definitely take this and just not worry about powers. So take body armor, wear body armor sometime, or wear more heavy armor, just not even worry about the power part of this, right? Maybe have some other powers that are like. That you use when you're not in combat or when you want to be more subtle, right? But when you're in combat, just don't even worry about casting any combat powers. Just kind of go into the melee side. And then on the flip side, if you're just interested in powers, just having your laser sword be kind of a defensive instrument, more than just kind of like investing in a lot of fighting. So yeah, very cool. I would say that it definitely does. If you're doing a Star Wars game, you could definitely just use this and have Jedis and be totally fine. If you're doing your own thing, you could definitely kind of take your spin on it. I would say though, if there was a dedicated Star Wars setting, that I would think this would be different. I would not necessarily be happy with this. I would have liked to see kind of something more of a Mystic Powers-ish type thing for the base one, and then expanding that into maybe a full caster with some of the edges and other options. Just because, Jedi never... there's a very varied Jedi, and not all of them are necessarily always doing a ton of powers, right? It's much more like kind of what Mystic Powers is, kind of what a Paladin in Savage Pathfinder, or whatever, just in D&D and all that stuff. So, but certainly I think they did a good job and very cool for what it is. Okay, 2 more to go. I hope you're sticking with me because these 2 are bangers. First of all, we have the Technomancer, which is the most techie base of all of them, even more than the Energy Light Controller, which is not quite a tech energy. It's kind of confusing with that flavor. It's very Green Lantern-y, but as far as using science and all that stuff. But this one, we have weird science, right? This is, again, very open to your interpretation and your flavor of whether it's like you have an unnatural affinity with machines or nano machines, or you have some type of implanted consciousness that allows you to just directly affect cyberspace and all that. They're definitely open to your interpretation here, but using weird science, not electronics or hacking or anything. But definitely hacking is kind of a big flavor of that. Very good sized list here. A bunch of mix of abilities, obviously no healing. They also have a lot of specific powers that I'm not going to highlight them here, but they're in this setting. They're in this companion, but we've seen them before, like Ghost in the Machine, Create Item, Havoc. These are really cool powers that can really do a lot of fun stuff as far as just messing with electronics and people's tech and stuff. So cool that it's in here. And then we have the interface edge. So, oh yeah, what I forgot to say is that it's weird science, but you only get 2 powers to pick from and 10 power points. So we're kind of at a, not really quite a -1. It's kind of a, yeah, I guess it's a -1 because if we only just had 1 power, that would be a -2. So we're kind of at a -1, but it's an arcane background. It's not really like a hindrance necessarily. It's not like a worst critical failure effect or we can't wear certain armor, right? It's just we start with 1 less power. And then we get interface, which is an extremely strong edge. So you get +2 to electronics and hacking rolls. So, excuse me. If you are a hacking character, you just want to take Technomancer just to get that. I mean, +2 is the best bonuses you can get. So, excuse me. Generally, when we're looking at edges that give bonuses to skills, which is a lot of edges, we have +2 is the king. That's the best kind of bonus you can get. I would say +1 and free rerolls are kind of equal. Those are the next one down. Then we have free rerolls on a failure, and then we have ignoring 2 points of penalties, right? That's kind of at the bottom because oftentimes penalties might not come into play, right? It's only when the penalties happen that our edge actually does anything, where a +2 is always going to do something, right? A free reroll can always be used. A free reroll on a failure means that if you wanted to roll and and get a raise, you couldn't use your free reroll then. Why I bring this up is because this is really powerful for hacking, and hacking in a science fiction game can be just as effective as, fighting, shooting, your arcane activation rolls. And as you can see, they really don't have +2. Like when I talked about Scholar before, having +2 is something that you won't see, right? With any type of arcane activation roll. The Wizard in Savage Pathfinder had a +1, or Familiar, which I talked about before, which is an S tier edge. So really strong. And you also have it for electronics, which is crazy. In this guide, in this book itself, there is the Power Hacker Edge, which gives you a free reroll when failing a hacking roll. Then it says you can ignore the advice about making repetition on support or tests if using hacking to control the local environment, and has the ability to connect to it. So, this is a pretty weak edge, especially when we stack it up against the interface part of the Technomancer, right? Because it's only on a failure we get a free reroll. Now, the ignoring repetition, again, that's advice for game masters. That's not quite a hard and fast rule, and most of the time, the game masters are not going to give you too much gruff about that. But it's not like it's saying, oh, now you're allowed to affect and do tests, right? It's kind of up to if you have a certain device, or the game itself is kind of allowing you. If you're in a cyberpunk game and there's tons of people with cyberware implanted in their brains, and there's tons of things are able to. There's Wi-Fi or whatever. There's wireless networks and stuff like that, right? So. It's when we compare this to interface, it doesn't even stack up at all, right? Interface gives +2 to hacking and electronics, so absolutely crazy. Again, the flavor here isn't really there. You don't have access to the weird science edge, which is Gadgeteer, which I would have liked to see. I mean, again, as a game master, I'd probably allow them to. This is the only weird science-based arcane background in the whole companion, so I would definitely have liked to see you able to use Gadgeteer because I think it's a cool edge, but it is what it is. Again, so very, very strong. I mean, interface definitely makes up for and more that one missing power, but again, not a ton of flavor. But the next 2 edges definitely kind of make up for that a bit. So first we have Breaker, which one of the ones kind of similar to one of the Psyker ones where it's the flavor text kind of, I'm not really sure based on the mechanics, but we found this one. I know this one for sure was in the nano machine caster. I forget what they were called. I think they were called breakers in Dead Colony or Lost Colony. Had access to this, but they say those who know how to make high-tech devices know how to break them as well. Right? That's the flavor. We're having high-tech devices. Then it says damage against an object with hardness score can't usually ace, but it does for a Technomancer when using any damaging power. Objects with heavy armor still require the heavy weapon modifier to affect. So basically, when you're affecting something with hardness, you don't get any explosions on your dice, and this allows you to get explosions. So the flavor, though, kind of denotes that it can only be against high-tech devices. The breaker in the Lost Colony was because they used nanomachines, so it was easy for them to break apart kind of anything. I would say, though, let them affect anything with hardness. It's already a very, very niche ability. And they have to use their damaging power. It's not like a weapon, They have to use specifically a damaging power. So it's like, if you made it only high-tech devices, it would pretty much be worthless. So make it able to be used against any object with hardness. I would say, though, it's still a pretty weak ability. if you had this, you would want to lean into it of like, breaking support beams or trying to get in through something or whatever it is, but still a pretty niche edge. Definitely kind of a C range there of, it's useful. It can be useful, but you definitely have to come up with creative ways to do it. Okay. But then we followed up with drones, which is pretty awesome. Basically, you get a permanent summon, and you can see through them, activate powers through them, which is really cool. They don't talk about when you want to see through them, is it an action or free action, or if you're distracted. I would kind of follow the summon ally rules, which I think with summon ally, you're distracted and vulnerable. So I would just look to the summon ally rules for that. Probably use it as a free action. Again, they don't talk about it here, but each drone is toughness 5, is a small, which means their size -2. And as a scale small, that means anything normal has a -2 to hit them. Anything large has a -4. So that's kind of a little bit of defensive option. It also makes them sneakier. And they have a flying pace of 12, which is a pretty good flying pace. And you can keep taking this to get up to 4 drones, which is cool. Now, they're not the most strongest of supports, but they're cool because they're always on, that you can cast powers through them. So you can kind of be in your little hacker nest, or you can kind of be, behind cover and have your drones be your eyes and ears, right? Because again, they're not saying you're distracted or vulnerable. I guess I would not let them be distracted if that's the case, because they're extensions of your own body, right? If the drone is destroyed, they blow up for 2d6 damage in the medium blast template. But again, the cool thing here is that they can create or repair them with just some replacement spare parts, and an hour's work. So you're always going to probably have them going, because usually after a combat, people are going to want to rest, probably recover power points anyways, or do some healing, stuff like that. So you're probably going to always have your drones up. So Summon Ally still has its place, and you have access to Summon Ally, but these are going to be cool that they're always kind of up, that you can, hide behind stuff and still do all your hacking and do all your powers, right? And then you can choose to upgrade. Whenever you create a drone, you can choose one of these upgrades. So there's the firing platform, which gives them a blaster. So they have a shooting roll of D6. They have very short range of 5, 10, 20. It's 2D6, but they do have rate of fire 3, and they ignore recoil, which is cool. They only have 50 shots, so you will be going through them quickly if you're using rate of fire 3. But that's the case. Then they have the stun gun, which is a range of 5, 10, 20. And if they hit somebody, it's a vigor roll, or a vigor roll with a -2, or they're stunned. So when you look at these, I actually think the best part of these drones, as far as being your eyes and ears, being able to like hack and do things, being able to like spy, use them for espionage, use them to be, so you're protected. They're also really, really good. I would use them not for offensively. I mean, obviously with the stun, it's not quite doing damage, but even with the firing platform, I would use it to do test, right? Because they're rated fire 3, they don't do very good damage. So because they're rated fire 3, that makes your testing going to be much more, most likely to actually do something, because they're going to be hit, and you keep the best ones. So I would say they're best being used to do test with their firing platform. Is, remember, with the rate of fire 3, you just roll and you take the best die, and that's what you use for the test against them. So yeah. Again, drones, very, very awesome, very flavorful, very unique, in that you can still have, you can still be somebody who builds robots, who builds other drones that are much more powerful, but these are ones that are just always kind of around and have these unique ability, but be able to see and cast powers through them. So very cool. Technomancer is very, very strong for those, especially when hacking is a thing that you can do. Okay, the last one we have is Warper. Another focus-based caster. They have three powers to choose from their list, and 15 power points. So again, we're getting the new powers edge kind of here for free. Very, very small list. The Warper itself is, connecting with the, some other dimension or the warp, whatever that is. I definitely get very strong Navigator from 40K vibes, right? I also get very strong Mass Effect vibes here for sure. And so what else do they get? They can take the Gifted Edge, which is awesome. They have the astrogation ability, which is, again, here's kind of the Navigator from 40K flavors coming in, which gives them a +2 to science rolls for astrogation. Astrogation is a mechanic that's added in here. Basically, when you want to go somewhere, you want to use your like a drive. There's this table. There's also some other things that, like, if you know where somebody is or you have the direct coordinates, it's not as bad. But you can see here we have like a -0, -4, -8. So having +2 is really, really helpful for the astrogation mechanic that they have in here. Makes it much more reliable. So you definitely would want somebody, a warper on here, to have that +2. It's pretty cool. Yeah. Okay. They have access to hyperspace, which basically means that as a limited action, again, they don't have to actually make a roll. They just have it as a limited action. They can teleport up to 12 inches. without having to spend any power points or make any type of roll. And that's it, right? It's a really, really cool always on ability. Very, very useful out of combat, in combat, right? To get away from somebody who's on you, to get close to somebody. Here's where I really have the Mass Effect flavor of, I forget the actual name, but in Mass Effect 2 and Mass Effect 3, my favorite class was always, I think it was the Vanguard or Sentinel. No, Vanguard, I think, where you could like teleport in, hit somebody, and then fire with your shotgun. So, either very offensively, it's a cool ability, and defensively, it's a cool ability. Now, they even talk about if you want to have more range than that or have other modifiers, then you have to take the teleport power separately. So they're mutually exclusive with each other. So either you can have this, they're not mutually exclusive, but you can have this and you can have the teleport ability, and they kind of have their roles, right? And then they have the critical failure effect, where if you critically fail, you have a micro black hole in yourself, which is the black hole power, which I talk about a lot in the part 1 video, which, it's not the upgraded damage, so it's not horrible, but it's there. But yeah, again, very, very strong. They're definitely starting out ahead. I mean, we have a whole edge as far as having the new power edge. And they have the astrogation ability plus the hyperspace ability, which I would say almost pretty much equals an edge. So, does the critical failure effect equal a -4? No, it doesn't, right? It doesn't even really equal a major hindrance, in my opinion, because it's already adding on to the backlash effect anyways. So, all their flavors kind of here, I would say, and a lot of mechanics. So warpers kind of do what they do in the core. And you'll see that the edges aren't the most expansive. So first one we have is Channel the Warp. This basically allows you to it says here when you spend a Benny to recover power points, you may make a focus roll. So it's not something that you always have to do. If you're successful, you get 5 power points back. If you get a raise, you get 10 power points back. So this is where the kind of mechanical benefit of it comes from. If you fail, it's 3 power points, and if you critically fail, you're treated as a backlash, right? So that's pretty bad because you have the whole critical failure effect of getting a black hole on you. So yeah, I don't know. It's interesting. I would say it's kind of like how often do you spend a Benny, to get power points back. This is a novice edge. I mean, before I took this, I'd probably want to take the power points edge. I'd probably want to take rapid recharge, right? But it does allow you to take more. But it's kind of like you're taking an edge that then allows you to gamble, right? And most of the time, it's not going to do anything for you or do something bad for you, right? A success doesn't do anything for you. Only on the raise does it do something for you. So I don't know. It's kind of a hard sell, in my opinion, as far as choosing to do this and like how often are you getting a raise, right? You're definitely going to want to have at least a D10, I would say, in your arcane skill before taking this, just because the failure and the critical failure effect are so horrible. I would have liked them to see maybe buffing this as far as like a failure effect just does nothing. On a success, you get like 7 power points, and on a raise, you get 10 power points, right? Just some more benefit here because I don't know. Again, I would rather take power points or rapid recharge or concentration or channeling. There's a lot of other ways to get more power points back than this. But it is novice. Most of those edges I was talking about are seasoned only. So that is the only kind of bonus here. But I would, again, probably wait till I had a D10 or even a D12 before I started really wanting to use this. Okay, then we have Warp Surge, which basically increases your hyperspace ability to do 2d6 damage automatically as a small burst template. Doesn't affect you, but it does affect allies. You can't do selective or anything. This one's pretty meh. Again, it definitely going in on the kind of Mass Effect flavor I was talking about of warping in and hitting somebody and then using a shotgun. But it's it's an edge that upgrades an ability you already have. It's kind of like a always available basically blast now, right? Because base blast just does 2d6, although there's no way to get a raise. But 2d6 is pretty low damage, especially in a science fiction game where people are going to have much more armor and stuff. It's not like this ignores, armor at all. So I don't know. It's okay. I would say that if you're doing a really, really offensive build like that, if you're doing mixing this with a melee build, or you're mixing this with having a kind of very, very powerful gun that's maybe a bit shorter range, I would say this is then kind of cool. But I would say mechanically, you're going to probably be a little bit underwhelmed by this. You can just blast over and over again, but again, it's 2d6 damage, and then you're kind of close to them. So yeah, it's definitely a more offensive take on the Warper, but the base Warper does what you want it to do and has really awesome flavor. So Yeah, that was part 2. Sorry I had to talk quick. There was a lot more Arcane Backgrounds to get through here. As you could see, I was pretty lukewarm as far as the Psyker and the especially the Shepherd goes, but the rest of them had really cool mechanics, really cool flavor. I mean, overall, I think they did a really, really good job on, this whole new iteration of companions. That they've done a much better job from the last edition as far as the fantasy and the science fiction companion goes, as far as their flavor and Arcane Backgrounds. So really cool. But yeah, let me know if you wanted me to go over anything else in the science fiction book. There's definitely a lot of edges. There's a lot of starships and vehicles, all this other crazy stuff. So hope you enjoyed it, and happy gaming.
Savage World, one of the best games today. Savage World, Benny and Harry.